Sidney Crosby is not above criticism. Did it myself earlier this year when he was moping a little bit too long about the loss of Jake Gensel, but not trusting him? That's different. Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates in the same place that you found this. No, Sid has not signed an extension yet. And no, that doesn't matter. Why? Because Sid is committed to the Penguins. Sid is committed to the city of Pittsburgh, where he's now spent more of his life than he has anywhere else. And Sid's as committed as ever in his own subtle, classy way to protecting his legacy, just as he's aware that a part of that legacy links him to Pittsburgh forever, no matter what, but especially if he only ever wears one sweater in the National Hockey League. All of this has been spectacularly, blissfully clear for the better part of 2 decades now. There's nothing more that this extraordinary individual could have done in that time to earn more trust, more faith from the fandom, but really, from everyone. So while I get that some Canadian media outlets that have absolutely nothing else to talk about all summer because it's all hockey all the time, and when there's no hockey, oh no, they're going to fabricate stuff. They're going to pretend that Sid could be traded. There was an article on the TSN website to that effect. Not a report, mind you, but just a hypothetical. What would happen? It was a advanced analytical analysis of what would happen to any of the other 31 teams if they added Crosby. And it's flagrant clickbait, but then, if you're a reader who has the same feeling of desperation for hockey anything, you're gonna probably click on it, and then it's mission accomplished. That's just part of it. That's to be expected. No, Sid hasn't had a lot of these over the years, something he was joking about at one point in the middle of the past season. He hasn't had to answer a lot of questions from people in my profession about, gee, Sid, do you think you'll be back? Would you like to be back? Or any of that kind of stuff. But the media stuff will still be concocted, and again, most of it emanates from north of the border. The part that I find disappointing, because that's to be expected, is when it comes from, around here, from people who really ought to know better. I mean, I get questions from people who say they've been passionate followers of the Penguins their whole lives, from season ticket holders, from people who've been watching Sid since he was the kid, wondering if he, really wants to be here or whatever. And I can't honestly even bring myself to come up with an answer that's worth anything, because to me, the answer's so obvious that I feel like I'd be insulting you by even answering the question. And I still won't do that. I won't do it directly on this episode either. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all your summer sports needs this season, from Major League Baseball, golf, NHL, NBA playoffs. Get the latest odds and lines, including all team matchups, player props, odds on just about everything that's out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. But here's what I will say. Actually, it's a couple of things. One, Sid's not going to sign a contract until he's in town. He's not in town. Once he is, it'd be a really smart move for him, for Kyle Dubas, for the whole team to get that out of the way before the first bucket of pucks gets dumped onto the ice in Cranberry. Nobody's going to want that hanging over anybody's head. Nobody's going to want there to be any kind of questions about it, and least of all, Sid. 2, and I don't blame him for this a bit, after the Gensel trade, which legitimately and understandably made Sid really mad, even though in hindsight, that trade now makes more sense to everyone, and I'm sure it probably does to him as well. Unless, of course, he'd be of the belief that the Penguins should have paid what the Lightning did, and that was a lot. He had every reason and right, given his unique stature, to spend this summer communicating and through that pressing Dubas for some concept of what this is going to be like moving forward, because he wouldn't want to be part of some kind of rebuild, because why would you? If you're Sid, you've got no reason to ride out softly into the sunset, whereas you've got every reason and every motivation to go for a fourth cup. When he looks around the room, he sees Evgeny Malkin still as one of the NHL's most productive number 2 centers. He sees Chris Letang. He sees Erik Karlsson. He sees a handful of other players. He believes in Tristan Jarry. And what he doesn't see and shouldn't see is some sort of pure rebuild. Well, this summer has gone the way it's gone. I've made my feelings on it known regularly. I have praised Dubas profusely, the polar opposite of what I was doing last summer. And if Sid had anything to do with that, meaning through the pressing that I was describing, awesome. Because then he does get to set himself up for everything that he wanted career and legacy-wise, in addition to being able to compete. When we come back, J1Q. Today's J1Q comes from my man Stu, who is a vocal and ardent critic of Mike Sullivan on multiple fronts. And having communicated with him for many years, on this occasion, Stu says, DK, who or what solves the onslaught of odd man breaks against? Now, I'm not armed in the moment with odd man breaks against stats. I know that the Penguins were grotesque in that category for a couple of seasons. I feel like that was gotten largely under control at 5-on-5 this past season. I also feel like it was catastrophic when it came to the power play. So if you don't want to split those up, the argument can still be had. If you do want to split those up, and I feel like that would be fairer, then you think long and hard about Evgeny Malkin being on either one of your power play points, because it just doesn't work. I've never been all that crazy about it, including from the offensive standpoint, for the simple reason that he takes too many of those booming shots that go wide and end up wrapping all the way around the boards. The old Alexei Kovalev miss, for those of you who go way back. All you're doing is a big favor to the other team's penalty killers. But when it comes to all of the shorthanded breaks that they allow, all of the shorthanded goals they allow, that's where you start. That's where you start. Gino is not on the power play point. I'm not sure exactly what you would do with him from there. That might end up being the single most interesting thing that plays out in the early portions of training camp, but you can't have him back there. You just can't. You can't go through another season like that. Now, as for 5-on-5, the key focus of criticism over the years, and this really goes back to the 2018 playoff series against the Capitals, where Barry Trotz allegedly solved the Sullivan system. Do you remember that? Because Trotz made sure that Washington had a player or two picking on any defenseman who would pinch. And if the Penguins didn't have the forward rolling back to cover for a pinching defenseman, then the Capitals would just eat them alive. And they did. And it really, really hurt in that series. Sullivan's counter to this was, if the system had been deployed properly, that wouldn't have been an issue, meaning the forward needed to be back. I do feel like that was a stronger suit this past season than what it had been. And, not coincidentally, I do feel that was the case because players did it better. And when they didn't do it, and you could see and hear this at ice level on occasion, certain other players would let the players who were cheating on this hear about it. Marcus Pettersson, who's not exactly the most in-your-face guy on the roster, really went after a forward for failing to pick up such an assignment late in the season when the Penguins were on their little roll there. So if it becomes part of the culture like I feel that it did this past season, I don't think you're going to see the old, Trotz, Sullivan narrative pop back up. But you never know, and it's definitely something that they always have to be conscious of. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Penguins. We're going to do one more of these tomorrow.